Anna, I believe you are on and we have you unmuted. Would you like to say hi to everybody?
Maybe I could throw in a few things about the American States and Nations Bank that we're building. Basically, banking is something that everybody has a right to engage in. And in fact, it's guaranteed by law that everyone has the right to act as a banker if they wish to. And especially under the provisions of Article 10 of the Constitutional Agreement with the Federales, the states and the people reserve all of their rights that are not exclusively delegated to the federal government. And if you read the Constitution, you'll see that it's an agreement between the states and the federal entity, but the people are not part of that agreement except in a secondary subrogated standing. We are mentioned in the preamble, we're mentioned in Article 10, we're mentioned in Amendment 7, but we are not bound by anything in the Constitution. We have the ability to retain our full sovereignty, and it's only our fault if we don't. We can give it away, but it can't be taken from us. And essentially, some no-goodniks have gotten in here and worked a fraud scheme that has resulted in the American people being deprived of the exercise of their sovereignty for many years. But that nonetheless doesn't make it right. And fraud has no statute of limitation. So in terms of commerce, there is absolutely no doubt that the individual Americans who reclaim their state national status, that is, their birthright status as nationals of a state of the Union, such as Californians, Virginians, Ohioans, Washingtonians, Wisconsinites, Minnesotans. If you are reclaiming that status by expatriating from any assumed status as a United States citizen or a citizen of the United States, you can exercise your sovereignty with plumb. You don't have to worry about any challenge from the federal government. You can open your own bank. And so we're opening our own bank. We've reclaimed our national status as the birthright people of the sovereign states. In that capacity, we can operate an international bank. We can trade or we can engage in commerce. And the essential difference is that trade is private and lawful, and commerce is public, and it's based on commercial paper. Strictly speaking, corporations deal in commerce. People deal in actual money. And that's one of the conundrums that we've faced in figuring out what these fraudsters did and how they did it, is that they arbitrarily named corporate franchises after us. They infringed upon a copyright of our names that we never intended to give them and which our mothers and fathers never intended to give them. So we have a tortuous copyright infringement complaint against the British Crown and against the British government. But in any event, now that we know all of this, we're in position to take charge of our lives again, take charge of our property again, and to object to the actions and the presumptions of those various foreign governments and foreign corporations that have sought to enslave and make use of us for their own benefit. So, in your sovereign capacity, having done some paperwork and corrected the public record saying otherwise, you can operate a bank. so the American States and Nations Bank is basically a three-part institution. It has a bank repository for the purpose of receiving assets that the Americans are owed that can be then deposited and held by the bank repository. And then there is a international bank that can interface with either the CIPS system, which is the gold trading system that the Chinese have launched, or with the SWIFT system, which is the current system for making transactions in the fiat realm. I think it's important for everyone to understand that there are two completely different systems. There's the Forex and there's the IX. The Forex is the platform for making fiat transactions, and the IX is the new, soon-to-be introduced system for making trade and transactions in lawful money. And it's necessary for an international bank to be able to translate and interface with both systems. And the powers that be, who have a vested interest in continuing to force people to use fiat currencies based on commercial notes and that sort of thing, are trying to stop Americans especially from participating in a more global economy and to foreclose on our ability to trade in lawful money. But they're not going to be able to do it. And so that, in essence, is the position of the sovereign bank, to be able to interface these systems and to be able to do transactions globally for people. And that's another part of the bank. And then the third part of the bank are the actual state banks. Now, this is a little confusing, as many of these things are, because there's been a deliberate effort over a long time to confuse the names of things and thereby confuse the identity of things. We've seen that over and over again, where they've tried to confuse people about which state are they talking about. Because, as you see, there's a state of mind, a state of being. There's a state of state for almost anything you can think of. And they've deliberately messed things up so that it's hard to even talk about which state are you talking about. Well, when we're talking about our states, the states that we live in, that have rocks and trees and gravel, we're talking about the state in its most elemental organic sense. And the names of those states are always in all small letters. I know that sounds strange, but that's the way it is. So it would be Oregon in all small letters if you're talking about the actual factual organic state. Those states that are inhabited, or I guess you would, the better word would be where the people live, are represented by unincorporated states, and those have been named according to a different convention, which is Texas state, California state, and so on. Each one of our organic states and their states of America are nation states. They're political entities, but they are states on the sea and nations on the land. And so it's a jurisdictional thing where you are both a state and a nation, and that nation and that state is attached to an actual name like California or Texas. Okay? So when we call it the American States and Nations Bank, we're making a claim to serve both the land jurisdiction and the sea jurisdiction. And we can do that because we, the people, are not hindered by the Constitution. We're protected by it. Its guarantees are to us, not the other way around. So acting as individual sovereigns, we can do what the federal government will not allow any state of organization to do. Now, when we do this on a state basis, when we start a California state bank, that bank is limited because it is a party to the Constitution. But it can trade in any form of lawful money. It can even mint its own coinage, issue its own gold-backed certificates, and basically can establish its own benchmarks, as well as it can interface with other banks, with other state banks, and form an association of state banks so that the Alaska State Bank could do a joint venture with the California State Bank, or the Alaska State Bank could have an agreement with all the other sister banks throughout the nation that we're going to push for a National Coinage Act revision to make American national currency. So there are a lot of things that we can do that are allowable under the Constitution, and we just need to get busy and get ourselves ready and get our own ducks in a row, do our own declarations, make sure our own status is corrected, and go forward.
Anna, I heard that the state of North Dakota has a very stable economy because it exercises its right to issue its own currency.
It can.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. If you look at the Constitution, it says that states are absolutely forbidden from issuing any kind of currency except gold and silver coin within the federal-state relationship. Now, that isn't talking about the state's relationship with the rest of the state. It's not talking about its relationship with the people. So, yeah, they can issue their own currency. They can have their own state bank, even though they're a state of organization. That's allowable. But they're restricted from having a national, or I should say an international currency, because the United States government is supposed to be providing that for us.
And so will the American states and nations bank have an international currency?
We may, but we would want to, and I think have to, as a practical matter, have a consensus with the other states.
What about denominating its money in the Carrot Bar's notes, these one world currency notes woven with gold and a gram of gold printed on it?
Well, you could possibly do that. There are so many different things. We could contract with a provider like Carrot Bars to mint our own currency and have a American States gram card, or, there are a lot of different ways of addressing this and making these products available. I think a lot of people have thought about money in a kind of superstitious and silly way, and have not thought of money as a product. But all these different things are products. They're consumer items just like anything else. And, if you don't want to use FRNs, you can use something else. People have to become more sophisticated, and they have to be better consumers in terms of monetary products.
What would be the main benefits of, say, the average customer of the American States and Nations Bank as distinguished from other banks?
Well, I think there are a lot of advantages because many of the existing banks have locked themselves into contractual and franchise agreements that don't allow them to operate in a private way, that don't allow them to actually provide lawful money. They've also, by and large, made agreements that force them to practice unlawful conversion against private people. When you walk into a bank, the very first thing they offer you is a personal account. And most people hearing that think, oh, personal, that means, my own account, right? My individual account. Makes sense. But that's not what it means. Back in the 1860s, the Congress pulled a fast one and for federal purposes changed the meaning of the word person to mean corporation. Person to mean corporation. So when you walk into a bank, which is a federal franchise under the FDIC scheme, and they ask you if you want a personal account and you stupidly nod your head yes, that means that you're signing up for a corporate franchise account. And that means that they're going to ask you for a social security number to prove that you're a franchisee. And then everything that you put in that account belongs to the government. It belongs to a government franchise. And you have the authority to write checks on that account, but everything that you deposit is a 100% gift to that government franchise. And that's why when the IRS starts bullying people, and they go in and they look at bank accounts and they start this garnishing and all the rest of the stuff that they do, what they're doing is they're bringing a charge against a government franchise corporation. And they're also counting every dollar that you deposit and quote-unquote donate voluntarily to their franchise as income. Income, it's unique in terms of its legal and accounting meaning. Income is an accrual of a corporation. Private property is what people accrue. So, right from the moment that they start talking about income tax, a light should go on in your brain and you should say, oh, they're talking about a corporation making income. They're not talking about me, Joe Average, and my wages and earnings. But you see, because people don't bother to look up the legal meaning of words, and because, frankly, a lot of this stuff, the real skullduggery, has been hidden in reams of ugly historical documents 150 years old now, we've just been in this horrible, hideous, duplicitous system that is set up, geared, and intended to fleece us blind. But we now have the goods on them. We know what they've done. We know how they did it. We know who did it. We know when they did it. We know why they did it. We know where they did it. And we have all of the proof that any reasonable being would ever need to conclude that, yes, we were swindled. And I do mean fraud in the broadest sense of that word.
So it sounds like American States and Nations Bank would not have any involvement in any of that kind of design. It would have a design where you would absolutely own the account that you open and you would own the assets in it if you're a depositor, if you're a customer of it, right?
Right. Totally private. Private. Your own account. No government interference. No government franchises. In fact, as part of our planning for the bank, what we're doing, everybody has these routing numbers and all these systems have to interface. So what we're looking at is setting up a double-blind or maybe triple-blind even system where when you come into the bank and you want to set up your own accounting system, you get an individual, well, it's called an ILB, a individual living being identity, an alphanumeric code that is yours and unique on the entire planet, and that nobody knows, nobody uses but you. And you have a public code that you can use to make up a license plate for your car to identify it as your car, your trademark, your property. But you also have a private code and a key code that are yours that nobody can get into your accounts or bother your business or do anything to you at all in our bank. And there's always the pendulum swing. Things went so far, so communistic, so crazy back in the 30s when FDR really got the gung-ho on this and really started the Social Security ID system and all of that crap. But now we're going back the other way, and we're using their own technology and their own system against them. They used the numerical system, the Social Security system, as an escrow key, and they basically took all of our private stuff and made it public stuff. And now we're going to turn that around and use the same system to protect people's privacy.
Though a lot of people may be wondering, well, this sounds wonderful, but how can it be protected from those very feds who have been so zealous in the past in attacking good things? How would this bank be protected from them?
Well, a lot of the federal corporations are going to go away because they're crime syndicates and they're going to be liquidated. Okay, so that's going to take a lot of wind out of their steam. They're not going to be able to, go bullying around and harming Americans anymore. And it's coming fast. I just got word of over, almost 1 million of organized people signing up to be federal marshals, going through federal marshal training. There are 3 million government employees, basically, if you don't count, some of the agencies. And we've already got a third as many people signed up to act as federal marshals and to enforce the organic and public law and stop all this. So this is something, it's peaceful, it's lawful, it's not arguable, it's the truth. And, those corporations that have been here misbehaving and indulging in fraud and extortion and racketeering against Americans are going to have a real hard time operating that way anymore. And that goes for the court systems, too, because we're just plain out and out replacing their military tribunals with American courts, American common law courts that serve American state nationals instead of U.S. citizens. What happened is that after the Civil War, you had the situation where the northern states had been bankrupted. Their service organization, shall we say, had been bankrupted by Lincoln. And the southern states were in ruins. Okay? So nobody was minding the hen house. Everything was in chaos. In desperation, Abraham Lincoln turned to his generals and gave them the authority to protect the nation's money. And he also gave them the General Order 100, the Lieber Code, to protect our borders and our property and, set forth all sorts of rules that they had to operate under. The Lieber Code has never been withdrawn. It's never been inactivated. The Department of Defense is still under the Lieber Code. And that is because the Civil War never really ended. The Civil War has been going on for 150 years. We just weren't told that, and it wasn't supposed to affect us. What happened, as we all know, was an armistice at Appomattox in April of 1865. Lee's army surrendered to Grant's army. Good law, everybody's happy. Subsequent to that, President Andrew Johnson made 3 public declarations saying, we're at peace on the land, peace on the land, peace all over the land. This is great, right? But there was no peace treaty. There was no official peace treaty ever ending the Civil War. The United States remained at war in the international jurisdiction of the sea, and it's been at war in the international jurisdiction of the sea ever since. So that has created the problem where our country has been kept constantly embroiled in war after war after war after war after war. And these idiots in Congress have declared war when they had no authority whatsoever to declare war. No authority whatsoever to declare war. And in fact, all these things that they've engaged in are nothing but glorified police actions. Police actions. A corporation does not have the authority or ability to declare war. A corporation does not have the authority or ability to declare war. And they've been operating exclusively as a corporation since 1861. You see the problem. These people are in it so deep in terms of their unlawful actions that just being associated with this government is a problem. Just being associated, I don't care if you're a file clerk, it is so bad that these yahoos have done this to the unsuspecting Americans after doing everything possible to create the impression that we've been at peace. And, you know, essentially when a president stands up in public and makes 3 public declarations, 3 big announcements that you're at peace, that's a contract. Andrew Johnson made a contract with the American people that the land jurisdiction was at peace. That was his guarantee to us. And it stood good all these years, except that we've been under, in the jurisdiction, the international jurisdiction, we've been at constant war. And that's where the Trading with the Enemy Act comes in. That's where all this, the War Powers Act, all these illegal actions, all these, you know, the draft. What a completely criminal, completely unsupportable action. And they drafted millions of men in World War II. They drafted hundreds of thousands into Korea. And they drafted more hundreds of thousands into Vietnam. And 55,000 of people of my generation died in Vietnam, or because of wounds suffered in Vietnam, or because of being taken as POWs in Vietnam. They were conscripted. They were press ganged. They were enslaved against their will for the most part. Anybody who was drafted wasn't standing there volunteering. So, you know, when you think about it, these are war crimes of immense magnitude. These people need to be arrested. And no doubt some of them are just plain stupid and didn't know that they were doing anything wrong. But you can bet that at least a significant portion of them did know full well that they were doing something wrong, and especially those that have a Juris Doctor. These guys, how many members of Congress are there who are lawyers? Of the United States Congress, that is. They're lawyers. They have to know the law. They have to study this stuff. And you can bet that some of them knew full well what they were doing. And we're just doing it as you know, profit-mongering, greedy, nasty vermin. And then we get to the Titles of Nobility Amendment and all the different constitutions that have been palmed off on us. When you really start looking at it, when you really start understanding how they named things very similarly so as to deceive people, it blows your mind. You know, when I was growing up in grade school and junior high and even high school, the only constitution that I ever saw or ever heard of was called the Constitution of the United States of America. And I'm sure that for most of you, that's what you grew up with too. It was published in 1868 by a corporation calling itself the United States of America. They just didn't add the incorporated. And so this document is not the actual Constitution. The actual Constitution, which is called the Original Equity Contract by the Vatican and by the British monarch and all the other party hardies, is called the Constitution for the United States of America. And the word united has a small u, meaning that that word was being used not as a title, not as a proper name of anything, but as an adjective describing states of America. So this is going to come as big news to everybody, but the name of this country as a confederation established under the Articles of Confederation is States of America. And it always has been. No united anything about it. Well, so anyway, there are all these different constitutions, and if you want proof of what I just told you, you can go on the internet and look up the oath that you're not really but the person in Congress that is supposed to be representing you. If you look up their oath, you'll see that they take their oath to something called the Constitution of the United States. No of America about it. Just the Constitution of the United States. And how many of us have ever seen the Constitution of the United States? There has been so much chicanery going on, so many deceptive names used to fool people, such a shell game that it's absolutely shameless. You'll have to forgive me. I get a little bit passionate about all this.
That's beautiful.
It's shameful. And, you know, a lot of these corporations are not going to be allowed to continue. They're not going to be able to do business after something of this magnitude. And they're not going to have an excuse for it. It's all been just greed and control, and more greed and more control. And I'm not for the world saying this to harm the church or to be accusatory toward Catholic people or anything like that. But it has to be said and it has to be recognized that the church has a fundamental responsibility for this entire mess. Because the church, the Holy See, which is not the church exactly, but the Holy See came in and actually incorporated a lot of this stuff. And they also put in a lot of the different aspects of it that have been most damaging. The Internal Revenue Service started out in 1166 as a crusade tax. It was called Peter's Pence. And it was a special tax on income that was instituted to help pay for the expenses of the Crusades. So the IRS goes all the way back to the Inquisition. And like the Inquisition, and like Peter's Pence, on April 15th is when they collected that and the confessions. So what are you doing when you sign a 1040 form? You're confessing that you owe money. And you're paying it. You're paying your Peter's Pence 1,000 years later. And the IRS, agents of the Inquisition, then is now. And if you delve deeply into all of this, you'll find that the United States and its judicial organization is run by the church. You will find, if you look up a book called Principles of Ecclesiastical Law, now wouldn't that just warm your heart? Wouldn't you just dive into that one? I tell you, I have spent my life reading stuff that would curl your hair in boredom. And yet, Principles of Ecclesiastical Law, it lays it all out. It was published in 1894, and it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that what we think of in the higher forms is statutory law is canon law for the priests. Canon law for the priests, for the employees, for the judges. And above that is ecclesiastical law, which the Pope wields, and which his, get this, Lord High Chancellors in equity have complete authority over everything in their archdiocese. So the cardinal bishops, acting as general cardinals and judicial vicars, as general judicial vicars, are the ones who are supposed to be making sure that everything is handled in an equitable and fair and Christian manner in the United States for United States citizens. Not for me, because I'm an American state national, thank you very much. But in terms of the United States citizens, the quote-unquote Lord High Chancellors in equity are supposed to be making sure that people aren't losing their homes to fraud, to fraudulent claims made by banks that are just over the top. They're the ones that are supposed to be ensuring that people retain custody of their own children. They're the ones that are supposed to make sure that their constituents are not being held in jail for vacuous, evil reasons. And they have fallen down on the job, obviously. They have instead been milking the system 10 ways to Sunday. And it's all proven. The Bank of New York Mellon is the central hub of a human enslavement and racketeering cartel that boggles the brain. Vertically, the Bank of New York Mellon funds all of the different parts, the states and the counties of the federal system. The Bank of New York Mellon funds the federal government, its agencies, its 1031 agencies, its counties of, I should say, its states of, which are nothing but franchises of the federal corporation. And then, laterally, they take your birth certificate bond, and let's discuss what a bond is. A bond is a promissory note, like an enslavement indenture, where you remember back in the days when they had indentured servants, where you would sign up and you would promise to work for someone for 7 years in order to come to America and have a grub stake, that sort of thing? Well, in this case, you're a bonded servant all your life, from the time that you're in the cradle until you die. And you are working for them. And they are selling your labor, your promise of labor, on the world market. So they've enslaved you, and now they're selling the proceeds from that, trading these CUSIP bonds in the stock markets and exchanges. That's what they're doing. And the great clearinghouse for all this is the Depository Trust Corporation, DTC. Okay, so Bank of New York Mellon takes in all these bonds and they houses them with DTC, uses those, monetizes those as securities, and then the proceeds go to Seed and Company, which then forwards it on to the Vatican Bank, which launders the money, sends it back through the Canadian Central Bank, And that's where the Queen takes her cut of the profits of this. And then finally it gets cycled back to the Bank of New York Mellon. Round and around it goes. And all of this is being funded by slave bonds that are being floated on people that are supposedly United States citizens. So you can see why they're so desperate to entrap everyone and make people believe that they're United States citizens and make them sign up and sign paperwork declaring that they're United States citizens, because each one of us and our property gets subscribed to this filthy system. And as a result, they make millions upon millions of dollars. And they enslave us and oppress us and get a handle on us so that they can jerk us around in their own private little corporate tribunals. And that's what's been happening. And it is totally, 100% illegal, unlawful. Totally. Press ganging and inland piracy and unlawful conversion of assets and mischaracterization of non-combatant civilians, those are war crimes of huge standing. War crimes, those are things that have been outlawed for 200 years. And they've been getting away with it here in America, the quote-unquote land of the free. They've been doing it since World War II. FDR sold us down the drain, and so did Winston Churchill. They were both really venal, nasty, unconscionable men. War criminals. I mean war criminals. No doubt about it. Now, I'm not saying that Hitler was any better. But if this is the kind of ilk of person that we have running anything on this planet, we're in trouble. And we better listen up and we better wake up. And everybody better grab an oar and do something about it. And get serious.
Do you have more to share?
Well, there's so much. I mean, anywhere you look, look at the foreclosure situation. The banks go out and they advertise home loans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Average is wandering along and he sees an ad for a home loan, right? Well, naturally, he thinks that the bank is advertising to loan him money to buy a home. That's his entire assumption about the transaction and what home loan means. In fact, the banks are advertising for you to loan them your home. See? Home loan. If you will loan them your home, they will monetize it and they will benefit the escrow account of the government franchise that operates in your name. Imagine it. Every single one of these loans, these quote-unquote mortgage loans that we have examined, operates the same way. It's a unilateral contract. It's totally misrepresented. An average home mortgage loan has 67 different fraud contract or 67 different frauds that are commonly associated with every single one of them. They're literally not worth the paper they are printed on except for one fact. All of them are trademarked. Every single application that we've looked at is trademarked. And what they do, this is the heart of the whole scam. Unbeknownst to you, your signature is very valuable. It is owed unlimited credit. And when you make a loan application for one of these home loans where you're giving the bank your home for them to raise money on for their activities, unbeknown to you and unremarked by the bank and undisclosed by the bank or anyone there standing at the closing table, you're signing a trademark piece of paper. So they seize upon they enclose. It's a process, a legal process known as enclosure. They enclose your signature. They steal your signature. They steal your signature. And they use your signature then to create what are called derivatives. Well, derivatives are just like carbon copies or copies off a computer. They just take your signature and they reproduce it wildly and sell all of these things that they create based on their use and misuse of your signature and your credit. And they obligate you to pay for all of this. They take that document and they trot on down to the nearest U.S. Treasury window, and they not only get the full amount of the loan that they promised to give you, they also take out the entire amount that would be payable at the end of a 30-year mortgage. And they take that, and they often make 5-6 times what the entire loan was, the amount was. If you got a $200,000 loan, 30 years from now, when that loan matures, it's going to be worth $1.2 million at least. So they go down there and they take out the entire amount, and they leverage all of that as a bank asset for them. And then, I mean, that's bad enough, right? They leave you paying this, and it's your home at risk. Okay? And then, that isn't bad enough. Then they turn around and they saddle you with the monthly mortgage fees that have to be paid for the franchise, for the government franchise. The government franchise wants its cut of this. So the government franchise actually receives all of your monthly mortgage payments. And that gets fed into a conduit loan. There's no REMIC. There's no real estate trust. There's none of that. There are absolutely no IRS filings anywhere where any of these banks have filed transfer fees of that nature. It's just a huge fraud. It's another huge, huge fraud against the American people. And they were so arrogant about it. They were so sure that nobody would ever figure this out that they trotted on down to the patent office and they patented and trademarked their whole system. This was figured out by Merrill Lynch. And then Merrill Lynch hooked Bank of America into it, and it just went straight on downhill from there. There isn't a lawful mortgage or any kind of anything even approaching a lawful or legal mortgage in America. They are all acts of venal fraud from the start. Every single one of these banks that's gotten involved in this are guilty. And they've done it under the pretense that they were doing it against U.S. citizens, not American state citizens, but against U.S. citizens. Now, how do you like that? They created all these corporate franchises deliberately to abuse them, to use them as debtors and scapegoats. And that's what they've done. Mm-hmm. They all deserve to be taken out and flogged in the streets. I don't mean your local banker who probably is too stupid to know what was going on. I mean, who would imagine such a thing, right? Not in your wildest dreams or worst nightmares could you imagine what Wall Street has done and what the SEC has failed to do. But guys like Hank Paulson, they should be sitting in a jail forever for what they've done and the misery they've caused. You know, at a certain point, you just can't let certain people who have caused that kind of misery, you can't let them loose. They're too much of a danger to society. They're too much of a danger to innocent third parties and little kids. I want you to think about this. They attack us when we are babies in our cradles. Long before we have any idea what's going on, they have stolen our identity, taken a copyright on our names, and are out there selling us in the world marketplace as slaves and seizing upon our right to title to land that our forefathers owned and have passed on to us. You can hardly imagine a more venal, more calamitous, more disgusting, more cowardly, more fetid, disgusting system than what's been perpetuated on our soil by these monsters in suits, smiling and glad-handing us and telling us about Jesus and about justice. This is the biggest ball of malarkey that you could ever imagine. And they talk about mafiosi being evil or bad. You want to go after the, you want to go after the mafia dons? The mafia dons on their worst day never imagined the kind of stuff that Wall Street and the Vatican have pulled here. I mean, do you remember the London Olympics a few years ago, the Winter Olympics in London? Well, there was a very weird thing that happened in a very public manner at the Winter Olympics in London. There was a giant effigy of a dead baby in a kind of coffin-like thing. It's just standing out there, this giant effigy of a dead baby. And then there were all these hooded figures, like in priests' robes and with hoods over their faces. And they were all marching around and around and around the effigy of the dead baby. Well, now we know that the dead baby is called the infant decedent. And that's what they claim we are. Now, being a decedent does not necessarily mean that you're physically dead. It can mean, and in this case does mean, that you are presumed to have disclaimed your rights to your property, your rights to your true nationality, your rights to your name, your rights to your copyright of your name, your rights to own land, your claim to have ownership of your home, your car, or anything else. You have supposedly just given this all to these nameless banks and these storefront governments that these banks have been running, and to the Holy See, which at the end of the day is the great mother hub and spider in the center of the web. Now, I don't want to give anyone the impression that the church has not done magnificent things for the world, too. It has. We wouldn't have public roads. We wouldn't have the public bridges that we have. We wouldn't have schools like we do now. We wouldn't have universities. We wouldn't have social programs, hospitals, hospices. The church has done a lot of good work, and there have been a lot of wonderful people who have devoted their lives to the church. But there's a side of the church that is not what it should be. There's a side of the church that has been engaged in the secular realm up to its eyeballs for a long, long time with disastrous results. And so it's time for a house cleaning. It's time for a real soulful confession of sin. It is time for everybody on this planet to wake up and realize that we've been sold a real bill of goods. We have been mistreated in a really gross way. We've been sold a real bill of goods by people that were supposed to be acting as our trustees, who were supposed to be honored members of our communities, who set themselves up as the creme de la creme and the most educated and the finest and the richest and the most intelligent, and they're actually nothing but a bunch of rats, vermin.
Anna, there was an enlightened master from India named Osho who said all the evil in the world can be traced to two classes of people, the priests and the politicians. And he was persecuted for saying that, of course, and kicked out of countries and so forth. But he was obstinate and adamant about it and kept on giving soaring, eloquent discourses on all the details of it. What I like about you is that, on the one hand, you are giving the necessary education on the sources of the evil, the causes of the evil, the hidden influences that everyone needs to be crystal clear about. At the same time, you're not just dwelling on that. You're also providing the solutions. You're providing the mechanisms, the formulas, the, actions, civil actions, legal actions, commercial actions. And that's really where the direction needs to go. Anna, you have also news to share whenever you feel like about class action lawsuits that are addressing some of these issues, yes?
We have several things underway that are major claims in commerce, major claims in various venues of the law that are designed to bring a systemic remedy. And that's really what we want because, frankly, there are millions of people who don't have the education, don't have the will and the time, are not skilled, brave enough, or have the money to correct this. If you have to go through this and correct it step by step yourself, doing your own due diligence, it's going to cost you, probably around $500, and it's going to take a lot of your time and effort to just familiarize yourself with the situation, know who you are, stand on your own 2 feet, and go after these rats on their own turf. So, that's not a proposition that just everybody can do, and it's not a proposition that everyone should do in terms of, exposing themselves to the court system that's in place now. So what we're going after is a systemic remedy by which all Americans will have their baseline political status restored to them as birthright state nationals. And all of this stuff will get openly discussed and aired, and people will finally understand how this government is supposed to function, how it has malfunctioned, and what the choices are. Now, I'm not saying anything against federal civilian employees. I'm not saying anything against military servicemen and their families. I'm not saying a word against federal welfare recipients or political asylum seekers. Nothing. These people deserve our help and our support. And most especially, I am not saying anything against African Americans who were cheated and were the first victims, along with the Native Americans, of this entire venal system that came in after the Civil War. We thought, we won the Civil War. Slavery is abolished. Yay! People turned out by the millions, celebrating. Yeah. Well, it was short-lived. These European banks came in here, and in their view, all the freed slaves were chattel. They were possessions and the title to them was up for grabs. So what did these banks do? They took title. They seized upon the names of the freed plantation slaves, and they created bonds, and they monetized those bonds, and they used them and their property as collateral, backing the debts of the United States Government Service Corporation. And basically what happened is that private slavery was outlawed. The plantation owners could no longer own slaves, but public slave ownership was launched. And if you look at the 13th Amendment, which purportedly abolishes slavery, you will see that it does no such thing. It abolishes slavery in one breath and then turns right around and says that criminals can be enslaved. And then in the next section, the 14th Amendment, it creates the criminal, which is the federal person. So they seized upon title to the freed plantation slaves, used that as collateral for government debt, and that's where all this got started, with a terrible, terrible betrayal of the American Negroes. And that is why Dr. Martin Luther King had to come forward in the 60s and demand equal civil rights. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, how old you were when all this was happening or not, but I was middle school, early teenager at the time, and all this stuff was going on, and I remember asking myself, well, what's all this about civil rights? What are civil rights? Why are they different than any other kind of rights? And why do all these black people want civil rights that are equal? And what are they equal to? I mean, when you say equal, that implies that there's some sort of standard out there that you have to match up, right? Well, so when you dig into this a little bit, you find out that civil rights are privileges conferred by the government, by Congress. Congress gives you civil rights, and Congress can take civil rights away. And the thing that Dr. King was trying to secure, that he wanted equal to, were the natural and unalienable rights of the American state nationals. So, as long as there are American state nationals, then there are limits. The Congress has agreed to provide equal civil rights, but the Congress has never been a good organization in living memory. The Congress has been a crooked organization back to the 1860s. So instead of graciously accepting the fact that now black men and women would have rights equal to the American state citizens, they set upon a course to undermine the natural and unalienable rights of the state citizens too, so that they could enslave us all forever. And if you think about the way they've done this, they come to a woman who's in a hospital having just given birth, and they present her with paperwork that on the surface of it looks like it's just standard paperwork that, records the birth event. That, such and such baby was born on such and such a day to such and such parents. You have to be a real legal eagle to look at that paperwork and understand what it is. And these women are not legal eagles, and they're not at their best. They're, groggy, exhausted, drugged up, God only knows. And here they are, they're signing this paperwork under conditions of non-disclosure. And what that paperwork does is it, number one, identifies the mother as just an informant. Number two, identifies the mother as an unwed mother. Number three, gives that baby and the name of that baby over as a ward of the state. Under conditions of non-disclosure, this process needs to be nipped in the bud right there. All these hospitals and hospital administrators, everybody who's been doing this and just, obeying the law of the state of, which is nothing but a corporate franchise, remember, it's no different than McDonald's or Arby's and has no more authority over you than that. They've been doing this. They've been entrapping people in this way and seizing control of babies as property owned by the state corporation as something donated to them by the mother who was never told anything about this. Under conditions of non-disclosure, when my mother found out, she was so mad that at 93, she wrote out an umpteen-page affidavit and took it down to the local clerk of court and filed it. And I think that's what everybody in America who has signed any of those documents in any of those hospitals ought to do. Just stand back on your little flat feet and say, hey, I'm the mother of this baby, and it's a living baby, and it's a man or a woman, and its name is, and that name I gave it. And no, I did not intend to give it as a ward of the state. And for a lot of us, we're not unwed mothers either. And by the way, they're not U.S. citizens. They're American state nationals. American state nationals. Stick that up your pipe and blow it. I don't know about the rest of you, but this whole situation has got to stop. It cannot be allowed to go on anymore. And whether that takes, I first became aware of this, by the way, when I had my own son. I was stubborn about checking the box that I was married. And they wanted to argue about it. My husband had to come into the hospital room and stand there and tell them that, yes, we were married. Okay? That was one flag. And then I got to thinking about it and looking at this, and I asked, well, why is this listing me as an informant? Why doesn't it say I'm the mother? So I crossed out informant and wrote mother, right? Okay? And that just about drove them apoplectic. These two women came in and said, well, you have to sign this, and if you don't sign this, we're going to keep the baby here at the hospital and not let you take him home. And they had a big, brawny male nurse standing in the doorway. I'm sitting in my hospital bed, having just given birth. You got this scenario down? Are you beginning to get a little bit, red around the ears and think, what is going on here? Why is it so important? And why would you threaten the mother with the loss of her child, basically kidnapping, if she refuses to sign this piece of paper? Well, it's because the stakes are that high. It's because they're going to lose millions upon millions of dollars in property if you don't sign that paper and you refuse to acquiesce and say that you or your baby are a U.S. citizen. Well, start saying that you're not a U.S. citizen. Don't sign the paperwork. Tell them you don't have to. You're an American state national, and they can go fly their flag. You see how vicious this is? You see how they have created an entire class of people that they're trying to enslave, even though slavery has been outlawed since 1926 internationally. And yet they've created an entire class of people that are de facto slaves.
They try to discourage home births and midwives and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I heard about a couple that had a baby in a hospital, and they just didn't give the name. And the doctors kept saying, well, what's the name? And they said, well, we're still thinking about it. And they kept putting it off, and, well, we haven't come up with a name yet. And finally they got discharged, and they went home. And so there was no Social Security number ever assigned to the baby because they never had a name to attach it to. So they named it after they got home.
The name is the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And that is laid out in the Bible. Because Adam was given the job of naming animals and things, but he was never given the job of naming people. So that's the mark of the beast. Because if you have a name, you're either a thing or an animal, in the Christian doctrine anyway. And I suspect that is part of where the church went astray. It's the problem of how do you name a living baby and not get into trouble with the mark of the beast. Well, I have a solution for them. I consider a name a possession like a bicycle or a lamp or a set of china, something that you inherit. It's a possession. It's yours. It's property. And it's external to you. So, the name is a thing. You're not a thing. Okay? And that's how we should handle this. We should look at a name as a thing that is apart from us, a possession, a tool that we use. That's ours, legitimately. And lately, as they've gotten desperate and they've tried to get out of the repercussions of what they've done, and they try to weasel around and say, oh, no, we're not crooks, they've lit upon the idea that your surname can be seized upon by public entities. Because after all, there are a lot of Johnsons and there are a lot of, Olsons and most people don't know where their surname came from. So they've seized upon this as a public asset. And the church actually says, the Holy See actually says, that your name is your first and middle name, but that is your property and that's who you are in the law. And so it's the upper lower case, first and middle, not the last at all, that represents the living being, the living individual being. So that's their system. And when you use your surname in that system, you are identifying yourself as a vessel in commerce, either maritime commerce or admiralty. So, anyway, all this stuff is revolving around religion and around terrible misuse and breach of trust and law forms that have been spurned and spawned and kicked around and competed with each other for millennia. But, before I leave the whole topic here, I wanted to bring up something else that happened back in the Civil War earlier so that people have an understanding of the court system that they are facing. What they are facing are administrative martial common law courts. That's what's occupying your courthouses, are administrative martial common law courts, and giving the false impression that they are public and civilian. They're not. There are two kinds of courts that are operating out of our courthouses and pretending to be our courts when they're not. They're all for U.S. citizens, and there are two kinds of U.S. citizens. There are living people, that's United States citizen with upper and lower case. That's a living being that has been born in federal status like someone from Puerto Rico or Guam. They really legitimately are a U.S. citizen. Thanks to all of the rotten stuff that went on after the Civil War, African Americans are U.S. citizens. They were never given their state national status, so they are United States citizens, upper and lower case. And then there are all these corporate personas that they've named after us and marketed to the world for their own benefit. And those are all named in all capital letters. So these courts, there are two kinds. One of them deals with the people that are United States citizens, and the other one deals with the corporations. Neither one of these have a damn thing to do with you. It's completely spurious that they even attempt to address you or send mail to you. It's mail fraud for them to send mail to you when you are not actually voluntarily a United States citizen. So anyway, you have an administrative court and you have a martial common law court, an admiralty court. And the genesis of these courts in America is rather peculiar, and again, it all goes back to the end of the Civil War. As I started out to say earlier, the northern states were bankrupt, the southern states were in ruins, and the Army was in charge under the Lieber Code. So Congress, which was not really Congress, it was a thing calling itself the United States Congress, not the several states in Congress assembled. United States Corporate Congress was in charge, and they said that the military commanders could appoint people in their districts to run courts for the purpose of dealing with rebels. And these 10 districts in the southern states were set up so that the generals from the northern states could appoint their pals to come to these southern states and sit as judges and fleece everybody blind. This is where the carpetbaggers come from. All these people come down from the north to take up, slack and loot and pillage and steal from the southerners. And that's what they did. They set up these quasi-civil military tribunals under the guise of being civilian courts when they're not. And they put their cronies in, and that's what they're still doing. They just expanded it all over the country. Now, there was a great outcry over this back in the 1860s, and so there was a U.S. Supreme Court case that came up called Milligan Ex Parte that very clearly states that if the American state governments are operating and the people are putting up their American common law courts, then there's no excuse for these courts to be in existence. And they have to go back to their normal jurisdiction and just be admiralty courts serving federal purposes, right? But because we didn't know what was going on and we weren't told deliberately by the vermin that were, making the big move, their inland piracy on us, these courts eventually took over. And that's what we've got now, our military tribunals being run by cronies for the purpose of fleecing us. And the way out of it is for us to honor our own obligation to be self-governing, to take back our birthright status as American state nationals, to hold our own elections, set up our own courts, swear in and educate our own federal marshals, and get on with life. And then we can invoke Milligan Ex Parte and kick these tribunals, these private corporate tribunals and military courts, right out of our courthouses, and they'll have to go pay their own rent.
This is fantastic.
When all of this stuff first came up, somebody said to me, how do you know all this stuff? I know all this stuff because Americans have been digging at different parts of this for generations. I know all this stuff because things didn't add up. You know, ask yourself this question, which I asked when I was just starting out in life. If we're so free, why is it that we have to pay 40% of our income? Yeah? If we're so free, why do we have to fill out this paperwork and give up 40% of our income to the government? Hello? And if we're so free, why is it that these government agents think that they can just trespass on our property at will? Why do they think that they can just come to our house and bang on the door and come bouncing through like, you know, some sort of I don't know, SWAT team on steroids? Why do they think they can do that? There are a lot of things that just do not and did not add up. And I think that a certain amount of skepticism and curiosity about such basic issues that affect yourself and so many others is absolutely necessary. I mean, think of the harm that we have done by stupidly allowing this to go on. Think of all the money that we have paid out in taxes and the harm that has represented to us, the sacrifice that has represented to us and to our families. And then think about all the misuse of that money. Think about what Congress has done with that money in terms of harming others and profiteering and racketeering and causing trouble in the world. It's just mind-boggling, and we've supported it. We have innocently supported it, but we've supported it nonetheless.
Anna, this is a fantastic overview of both history and the current situation. It's deeply insightful. It's a lot of what some people know already somewhat and partially, but you've filled in a lot of the details, a lot of the insights that go beyond the average understanding. We really appreciate it. But there are questions. People have raised their hands to ask questions. I'm wondering if it's okay with you if we go on to some of those?
Sure.
Okay, and first, everyone, there are a couple of websites, brillianceincommerce.com, then Anna's basic site of asanbank.net. So this is the bank's site, and then her Carrot Group site. So KARATGROUPSITE.com/AMEAGLE. That would be understood as an abbreviation for American Eagle. So AMEAGLE 1956.html. So Carrot, KARATGROUPSITE, carrotgroupsite.com/AMEAGLE 1956.html. And that will give you the access to the gold business in Anna's network. And for those who called in and who are listening, who came in through other introductions, get back with the person who introduced you for the link to Carrot Bars from the person who invited you. Now, we have some callers who've asked questions. I'm going to unmute one of your people in Alaska, a 907 area code, Anna. And this is 907-487. If you're still there, you're unmuted now, and you're welcome to ask your question if you still have one.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate that, Anna. Great work. I've been following you for a while. We are so proud of you up here, but all of us listening, you are just a strong woman, a strong person. I love you, Anna. Your spirituality, your just simple way of doing this. Here's a question. My wife has a serious medical problem that we need to leave the country to go take care of. And I'm not worried. I'm not fearful. I have overcome all that. But in reality, we may not be able to get a passport if we don't want to be a U.S. citizen. So there's one question. Second question is, we know that you levied a $279 trillion lien against the bar associations, against all the dirty buggers. I've been studying UCC, which is their system. You make that quite clear, Anna. It's their system. But it is a system that we can beat them at. You had to have become a secured party creditor with your UCC filings. You obviously understand what the bond is. Okay, and so it was mentioned in the outline on this for this show that it's a non-UCC strategy that you're now working on. And just hallelujah, really, Anna, for all of your insight. If you could address those two questions, I would appreciate it. And thanks so much for the hosts, too.
Okay, first and foremost, I am not, let's put it this way, commerce is not my strongest suit, all right? I can maneuver my way around in it out of necessity, right? But of all the things that I really, in my prayers at night, I see a world in which no great-grandmother has to maneuver around in commerce or answer admiralty courts about anything. That's my world. So the liens were Judge Steve Curry's brainchild, and I signed on to the liens, even though, there are some problems with the $279 trillion lien, because I didn't want him to be standing there alone. He was brave enough to go do it, but I didn't want him standing there with nobody else backing him up. So that's why I signed on to that lien. And the lien has now been perfected. It's been curry-combed. And my understanding is that the intention is to monetize the lien. A lien is a security interest, as you all know. And so when you have a perfected $279 trillion lien against the American Bar Association and the International Bar Association and their members, you can take that to a bank, and a bank can monetize that for you based on the debts that are owed. Now, at the time this was done, the Bar Association was feeling very cocky about this and very sure that they could deal with the rubes and that they wouldn't have to face any consequences. They were so arrogant that they didn't bother to even respond to Judge Curry's lien. However, the world of commerce is nothing if not draconian. If you ignore that kind of a presentment, you do so at your own risk. And we have since learned all of the processes necessary to enforce that lien in courts. So I think that a lot of the lawyers that have been so eager to be Bar Association members and who have clung to their bar cards and let the Bar Associations rule them are going to be very eagerly tearing up those same bar cards and coming back to operating as lawyers instead of as attorneys and forswearing any foreign titles and emoluments and actually getting back to an honest practice of law instead of the kind of skullduggery that they've been involved in. So anyway, I would suspect that, if I were facing a $279 trillion lien, I would pretty much call that organization gone, because sooner or later, enough of their members are going to be taking enough hits and the associations themselves are going to be taking enough hits that they're not going to be in business. And that was the actual intention of the lien, was to put the bar associations out of business, to just plain out and out bankrupt them. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay, thank you very kindly. Next, we have area code 419. I know you've been waiting a long time. Are you still there?
My question is for Judge Anna. Looking at the Federal Reserve note status, or where it is presently within our economy, where do you see that 5 years from now? And will companies like Karatbars, or a company like Karatbar, how fundamental is the corporation Karatbar within what needs to be accomplished to stabilize our country, our economy, our planet?
Well, I guess, Royal gets this almost religious fervor about gold and understands it in ways that I don't, or at least I don't as yet. So, his perspective on it is significantly different than mine in that respect. I look at it in the very plodding, practical way that over half of the world's people are trading in gold now. China, India, Brazil, all of Europe basically is committed to trading in gold. And only 1% of Americans have any gold at all. 1%. Now, that just strikes me as being an untenable position to be in. And so I looked at Karatbars back in 2011, which was pretty near the start of the company. And frankly, I was turned off at that time because I just basically don't like multi-level marketing schemes, even though Karatbars is not a typical multi-level marketing program. It does not require you to have any ongoing minimum production or to get a certain number of people involved or any of that kind of stuff. It just offers a percentage of commissions. So it's not like Shackley or some of these other things that really went to the top with multi-level marketing scheme things. But I don't like those, so I was turned off. And the other thing is that even though the Karatbar idea of the cards with the little small amounts of gold is appealing as a very ready cash-like substitute, at the time, I didn't think the 30% added value of the packaging and the assay and cutting things into small pieces really made much sense. I wasn't seeing far enough, basically. But here's the situation. Now everybody's trading in gold, and there's going to be a foreseeable increase in the amount of trading that goes on in gold. And as that happens, the price of gold is going to go up. Nobody knows how far, but we know that it's going to go up. And as it does, that 1 ounce coin that you purchased for $1,300 today might be worth as much as $10,000. Okay? So imagine taking $10,000 into the local grocery store to buy a couple loaves of bread and some milk. It's just not practical. Things have gotten too crazy then. But the Karatbars offer the advantage that they're in very small denominations. And, you can take a gram of gold in and trade it if you've got something that proves that it's gold of a proven quality and it's a proven amount. You can use it as cash, and nobody is going to be standing there wondering about it or ifsy-ansying whether it's what it is. And that can be a lifesaver. And the other thing is that Carrot Bars has initiated a program where you can have essentially a MasterCard or a debit card that's based on your gold holdings and your commissions if you have them, that allows you to have a credit card that works. So that even if the fiat system and the fiat currencies go completely kaflooey, you'll still have a credit card that works. And that can be a lifesaver too. And especially for mom and pop. People that can invest in bullion and buy it by the bar are not the people I'm worried about. It's the little guys that, have to make the rent and live their lives and feed their families that I'm worried about. And even though Carrot Bars does have significant costs attached to its packaging and, the labor that goes into assaying and cutting the gold up into such small portions, it does offer some significant advantages to mom and pop. You can buy gold in these small quantities much more affordably than if you have to buy a whole 1 ounce coin of it, say. A lot of the people that I am concerned about don't have an extra $1,300 in their back pocket to spend on a 1 ounce Cougarand or something like that. So.
Thank you for taking the time to educate us. It's a huge educational lesson.
Okay, well, I'm glad everybody's out there listening. It's very important. So, were there any more questions, Thompson?
Area code 248.
Ezra Pound was the one that summed all this up in a nutshell. He said, the scourge of today is the ignorance of the monetary system, like the scourge of previous centuries was the inability to read plain print.
Well, that's true, and it's also untrue, because most people are not trained to read legalese, aren't aware of the special meanings of terms that were embedded into, pieces of legislation and hidden away, and there's really no reason why they should be. When you are dealing with the public, you should be dealing with them as the public. And you should take it into your scheme of things that people don't know legal jargon, and they shouldn't be expected to. And they shouldn't be taken advantage of because they don't. I mean, the principles of fair play and honesty should protect and pertain even more to those who do not have advanced educations. One of the things that Royal and Thompson were talking about early in the show was the need to have a benevolent and kind and compassionate attitude to the other people in this world. And that includes the people that have good education, who have had the opportunity to advance themselves and to have professions and to be in responsible positions, to honor what the society has made possible for them, and to honor it by protecting and defending those who are less fortunate, who are not educated, and who can't do it for themselves, instead of preying upon them. What kind of world is it when those who have received the lion's share of the best of everything turn around and grind their heels into the poor and make fun of them and call them livestock and strut around in their fancy designer clothes and do all of these evil things? That is so totally wrong. That is so opposite of what should be happening. Those who have been given great educations and who have had the opportunities and the experiences should be right there at the forefront demanding change. They're the ones who should be here going, no, Mr. Congressman, that isn't going to happen that way. They're the ones that should be taking these judges to task. You know, my great Aunt Sally shouldn't have to have a law degree to go downtown and buy a car without getting fleeced senseless. You know, I'm sorry. My neighbor should not have to pay a mortgage when he's already paid that mortgage and far more the moment he left the closing table. And none of us should have to have a law degree and have searched through the congressional record of 1863 to know what personal means so that we can avoid entrapment at a bank. These are things that people like me have to get up and fight. And, you know, it may be an odd circumstance that I'm a grandmother, a great-grandmother, in Big Lake, Alaska, but I'm not going to stand here and put up with it. Not for me, not for my family, not for my neighbors, not for my friends, not even for my enemies. And I am hoping that everybody feels the same way, and that those of us who do have good educations will stand up for those who don't.
Absolutely. You have a higher level of awareness, Anna, and those who are becoming more benevolent, those who are becoming more unwilling to accept the crimes against humanity, and who are using their intelligence to catch the criminals, to stop them in their tracks, and to administer justice, and to replace corruption with honesty, with fairness, and with generosity, are those of higher evolution of consciousness. And in the future, our education system around the world will show that the greatest people in the world are those who have developed their hearts, those who have developed their capacity to care, their capacity to be as concerned about the welfare of one's neighbor as one is about oneself, and that it's not just following some religious rule or ideal, but rather it is the intrinsic existential reality of nature and of universal law, of natural law, and that what you send out comes back to you. How you treat others is a vibration in physics, cause and effect, action, reaction. The vibration you send out comes back to you. As you sow, you reap. A law of karma, whatever you want to call it, is a operating law throughout the universe, and the universe is governed by that. Humans have the opportunity to fulfill their destiny by learning this and by raising awareness, as you have, and realizing we're not here to exploit and to dominate, to enslave, to harm others, and it's not necessary either to be happy or to be prosperous. It's not necessary to harm any life anywhere in order for one's own happiness, one's own abundance, and one's own success to develop. On the contrary, one's own success is far greater if one is willing to be of assistance and service to others. So that's the basis on which the new system is unfolding, and that's why everyone loves you and loves everyone who is aligning with these principles.
Well, you know, I used to be a coward.
No.
Up until about third grade. When I was in third grade, one afternoon after school, this sixth grader named, well, I won't name him, he beat up my best friend. She was in third grade with me, and he waylaid her after school, and he just tossed her into a snowbank and was kicking her, and she was there helpless, and I lost it. I absolutely became a human buzzsaw. By the time I was done with him, it was like Leroy Brown.
Doesn't sound like cowardice to me.
Well, I lost my cowardice at that moment.
Oh.
I just figured that there's some stuff with up which I will not put.
Yes.
And I am not going to stand here and watch millions of innocent Americans mistreated and mischaracterized and defrauded by people that are taking their paychecks from our pockets. It's not going to happen on my watch. I'm sorry, not. So, I don't give a good gafooey what the generals like or what they don't like or what Mr. Putin thinks or how Pope Francis feels about it. I'm not going to put up with it. And I encourage all of you to put your hands up and say, no, we're not putting up with it either. I'm an American state national. I was born in California.
Yeah. We don't have any limit to how long we can talk, and it's entirely up to you. And what would you like to proceed with, Anna?
Well, it's getting kind of late here for me, and my voice is giving out.
Okay.
But let's take a couple more questions and see if there was something I missed that Royal wants to talk about.
Oh, okay. Maybe you were on the other line. I was saying that there are some people with questions, and Anna's still available, but her voice is starting to get a little tired, so she can't go much longer. But you're on the air, and we can either let you comment on something, or if you want to listen to what the questions are, and then either you or Anna can respond.
No, I just want to make a quick comment about Anna. And just, again, I'm just so blessed and so honored to be a part of her team and to assist her to accomplish her mission.
Royal, we lost you. Okay, somehow the disconnect happened. Maybe it was a cell phone signal problem. Okay, until Royal comes back, I'm going to go ahead, Anna, with area code 203.
Do you know, or can you kind of just give me an idea of how close we are to closing this in? Because I'm really looking forward to being, debt-free, or, those erasing of our debts, and especially these foreclosures, so we could just rest in peace. I mean, I'm just totally exhausted now. What would you suggest at this point?
Well, I want to give some well-earned credit to Patrick Devine and to Mark Amory,
Thank you.
And to their groups. There has been some real significant movement that I think is offering a potentially really great way for people to resolve all kinds of debt and to help their country and to put an end to the abuses that have gone on. But in order to answer this question appropriately, I have to go into some detail. So it goes back to the name. When you were born, you were given a name. Let's pretend that your name was Linda Ann George.
Okay.
Linda Ann St. George. Okay, that's your name. That name would be written in upper and lower case. And that's how you grew up in grade school. That's how you were taught to write your name on all your schoolwork. And that's the name that you've used your adult life long. But you have also received a lot of different kinds of bills over the years addressed to Linda Ann St. George in all capital letters. Okay, and recently you have also begun receiving letters addressed to Linda A. St. George, just middle initial, all in capital letters. Now, when you see something in all capital letters, that is your clue that the only thing that can be is a dead man's estate or a corporation.
Okay.
And so essentially what they've done is FDR seized upon your upper and lowercase name and made it the surety and the bankruptcy of the American corporation known as the United States of America, Incorporated, back in 1933. So that vessel in commerce was out of commission and in the control of the U.S. bankruptcy trustees until 1999. So all those years that you were using that name prior to 1999, it wasn't in your control. It was in the control of the bankruptcy trustees that were intent on getting money back out of you for creditors. In 1999, that old bankruptcy that you were unknowingly and unwillingly a part of ended, and your name was then, all debts against your name, your upper and lowercase name, were discharged, and you received it back free and clear. But you have not gone forth and straightened things out to take that name back now that it's free and clear and make it your own and under your own control. Okay? So you need to do an adult name change. Right now, they've got you as Linda Ann St. George in all caps. That's the name that is in their system for you. And as a first step of taking back control of who you are, you need a name, one that you can control and that is on the record as your name, belonging to you, your possessions, and you need a name that is free and clear of debt. So you go and you change your name back from uppercase to upper and lowercase. And that way you gain control of an international vessel, a trade name that you can use either to trade or to do deals in commerce or whatever you want, because it's a sovereign name again. Okay, so you reclaim what was yours. You reclaim your original name by doing a name change back from the all uppercase to the upper lowercase name. Then what you do is you expatriate that name from any assumption of any U.S. citizenship at all. And there are two kinds of U.S. citizen, like I was explaining, so you want to explicitly say that I willingly and of my own free act expatriate from any assumption of U.S. citizenship, of United States citizenship, or being a citizen of the United States, which is the corporate person. And I instead grant my allegiance to the soil of Virginia, where I was born. You take it back to the land, you take it back to the actual soil, which is your inheritance as one of the people who live here, and you leave it at that. Now, what you've done is you have captured a trust and a vessel that you can use. It's your possession, it's your property, it's your name, it's official now, it's on the court record, and you have dry docked that vessel. Its permanent port home is in Virginia or California
or Jamaica.
It's where your soil is. It's where you are. It's where you live and where you were born or where you are going to be. You know.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So you expatriate from U.S. citizenship and you go back to the land as your point of origin. So now you are outside of their clutches. You're operating totally within your realm. You are in charge of your name and your vessel, and you're properly situated and claimed back to the land of your birth, or the land where you are living. Now, the next thing is that you still have this other two names out there rampaging around, accruing debt and causing trouble, right?
Right.
Those things are still being traded on the stock markets. Those things are still U.S. citizens, and, you don't really have control over those names because those were created by other parties after the fact based on your birth name, and you are the priority creditor of those names, but they don't really belong to you. And in fact, each one of those names represents an entire series of legal constructs or legal fiction entities, they're called.
Right.
The first one, the all capital letters name, in our example, Linda and St. George, is a cest K trust. That is a form of trust that is created when somebody is lost and missing at sea or lost in a disaster like a fire or a volcano or something of that sort hits, and it's not known if they're alive or dead. So the state or the kingdom, whatever, comes in and forms a cest K trust named after that missing person, that missing individual. All right, so now you've got a cest K trust. Well, who was missing? Your upper lowercase name was missing. Right? Okay, so you got to get control of these two other names, and they don't belong to you. So how are you going to do that? Well, you got two choices. You can do it through probate, or you can do it through bankruptcy. And I have gone around and around and around and thought about this. What's the best way to collapse these things? Force a probate of the estate without harming the living man or woman. And there are some advantages to probate. But if you've changed your name to the upper and lowercase form, you're in a very good position. You have your trust established, you have your vessel established, and you have your point of origin, your domicile established. And now you're in a position where you can do a third-party forced liquidation of those other entities. And one of the things that Patrick's group found out is that the proper technical way of looking at this is that these are organizations, and they give some very good information about how to proceed and how to do a non-UCC claim and how to then record that claim and proceed through the Chapter 7 bankruptcy and force them to do away with those bogus false personas and discharge all your debts, your mortgage, college loans, car loans, credit cards, all that stuff, and leave you with a very significant nest egg to go forward into the future. And all of that information is being discussed right now at www.lighthouselaw.club.
Okay.
Now, they have a wonderful YouTube presentation on YouTube. It's called Settle All Claims. That's it. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend that you go there and listen carefully to that, run it through a couple times so you got it straight in your head. Okay. And then join the law club and go on their blog and their forums and start talking to people who are also involved in that. Start gathering the information and gathering the forms that you'll need and getting familiar with the process. It's a little bit of work. I'm not going to joke. It's probably going to take you, I don't know, probably 8 hours at least to kind of familiarize yourself with the whole thing, and then probably another 10 hours to gather up all the different documents and that sort of thing. So you're looking at a little piece of work, and you're probably looking at, well, in Alaska, it's $306 to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and I think it's somewhere in that neighborhood in all the other states. This is an unusual Chapter 7 bankruptcy because most Chapter 7 bankruptcies are people that are so deep in debt that they just can't make it anymore, and so they file bankruptcy to escape their own debts.
Right.
But in this case, this is a different kind of animal. This is a third-party forced liquidation by the priority creditor against these two organizations, the U.S. Bankrupt Citizenship Organization and the U.S. Bankrupt Public Transmitting Utility, which is what that other name with just the middle initial is. It's a public transmitting utility that is bankrupt. You have to go after both of them in order to get clear. Anyway, that information is there, and I would just get involved and get going.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. Anna, you could found a university, and maybe you will. We are just beyond our 3-hour limit, but we're still on the line because I don't know if the recording continued at the top of the hour, but this is fabulous, absolutely fabulous, and we're very, very grateful, and we're going to have you on again in the future for sure to continue. There'll be much, much more news and more to share as we proceed. So everyone, once again, the websites are brillianceincommerce.com, asanbank.net, and then Anna's Carrot Group site.com/ameagle1956.html. And then, Anna, you were sharing the www.lighthouselaw.org,
Yes.
did you say?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
LighthouseLaw.club. It's a club.
Oh,
it was founded by Mark
okay.
Amory. Mark Amory is a freedom guy. He has fought his own battles with the IRS and won them. And I guess that got his Irish up, and from there on in, he's been nibbling away at him too. But yeah, Lighthouse Law Club is a real fine little organization. It's a membership organization. It's $25 a month, and believe me, that's nothing compared to the information that they are working on and what they share, and just the overall spirit of the people that are there. And I highly recommend them. I know that, there are 6 million people out there in the process of losing their home to bogus foreclosures, or who have, recently lost their homes to bogus foreclosures. And, they cry out to me, they want me to help, and there just isn't any way that I can go, you can't. There is not enough time in anyone's lifetime to even begin scratching $6 million mortgage foreclosure cases.
Right.
But the Lighthouse Law Club has come up with an answer, which, with the addition of the name change, which does away with some other problems, I think should work very, very well, and should be very difficult for the fraudsters to overcome. And it has the potential of not only settling the foreclosure, but settling all the other debts and problems that people have, and actually giving them back some benefit from all that they've suffered as a result of the abuse and fraud that's been practiced against them.
And everyone, for unsecured debts, we've been 100% successful with those as well in the United States. So that is available for those who have credit card or student loan debts and need relief from those. So we have a lot of solutions, a lot of remedies, a lot of opportunities here, a lot of knowledge, and more to come, more in future episodes. Anna, we thank you. You're a beautiful being. We'd like to have you back. Let's continue as we have time. And may you be healthy and successful and happy, and continue to live a few more thousand years at least, if you wish, on this plane. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Take care.
And Royal, thank you very kindly for your contributions, and we look forward to having you on again in the future as well. Everyone, enjoy, have a wonderful day, and let's reconvene.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.